Hello and good evening to all of you. Really excited to welcome you to the 101 edition of TLR shows. I am your host for the evening. My name is 𝗦𝗙𝗥𝗕𝗚𝗏 and we are now going to be talking about marketing refreshed. Before I jump onto the exciting side of the show, a little bit about me. So I'm a traditional marketer who turned into a digital practitioner, and I've spent about a decade working in marketing and digital teams in Samsung, Maruti Suzuki, and I think I really believe, honestly, that marketing is something that you have to be a lifelong learner of, and that's exactly what we are going to be discussing today. uh, for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, this is, like I said, the 101 edition of TLR shows, which is brought to you now by TLR Now Consultants, which means that there have been 100 shows before this of people inspiring folks who have spoken about how their lives have got transformed. They've shared their experiences, and if, like me, you also enjoy listening to these experiences and upgrading yourself in life, please feel free to follow TLR Now page. They are a coaching and mentoring and training service provider. They're based in Pune. They're expanding. And when my dear friend Sriram asked me that, hey, we are having a session on marketing and Mr. Lakshmipathy Bhat is going to be there. Would you like to host it? I was like, hey, I'm going to be totally excited. I'm his fan. And like I had that starry eyed moment. And now I'm going to, without any further ado, introduce our special speaker for the day. Hello, Mr. Bhat. How are you?
Hi everyone. Hi Sharon. Great to be here.
I am so excited to welcome you here. And before we jump into our exciting conversation, let me quickly introduce Mr. Bhatt. So, Mr. Bhatt has 2 decades of experience in marketing and advertising. He's worked across geos in Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and of course, India. He's worked with prominent agencies like Gray, JWT, Thompson, and now he's the vice president of Marcom at Robosoft. He also is a very celebrated columnist and a guest blogger. I personally follow his blog, which is called bhatnaturally.com. That is a fantastic blog which has a wealth of information on marketing and advertising. So, without any further ado, Mr. Bhatt, over to you. How are you feeling?
Great. As I said in my LinkedIn post, even after all these years, the butterfly somehow seem to make an appearance in one's tummy. Before a big event or a presentation. In a way, it's a positive sign. Always keeps you a bit nervous about such large platforms, speaking to an audience such as this one. So it's exciting to be part of this conversation.
See, that's why I asked you this question because I am also getting the butterflies. I've already done a couple of bloopers, 5 minutes into the show. So yeah, that was the question that would make me also feel comfortable. Great. Let's get started. I think we have an exciting 50 minutes or so ahead. Let's quickly talk about something which I am really interested to know. So, we see all these very exciting kind of memes floating about how agency life is very, very hard. They show this copywriter who's laboring away at copies, and client keeps saying, "Nahi, this is not good. This is not good," right? So, maybe we could start by talking about how was life in the 90s when you started. How was it different? What was good, bad, ugly?
Right. Okay. First thing I'd like to say about this aspect is that most of us have this attitude of those were the days when it comes to anything in life. For example, if you look at somebody, talking about music in films, they would say those were the days when when they were in probably in the teens or whatever. And
They were.
when they were in the teens, their elders would say those were the days when about their own decade. So. One should not read too much into the past or feel that everything about it was great and everything now is bad. That is not the perspective that one comes with. First thing that strikes me about what how I felt in the 90s when it came to advertising was that I was truly mad about getting into advertising. I was very clear that I have to get into advertising, and I remember visiting several agencies with a portfolio of mine. Even though I was very clear that I wanted to be in account management, I didn't have any airs about it being a glamorous field or anything like that. It was very clear that advertising is about creativity. Account management enables that creativity, and it must impact a business. And I was crazy enough to have separate folders for various agencies. I used to have a folder for Trikaya, which was the big agency then. I used to have another
Wow.
folder for Enterprise and Rediffusion, and I used to
Wow.
see in Times of India or other magazines with their key number, cut it out and put it in their respective folders. And I used to sit in front of the television with a long, ruled book. And there was a program called Chitrahar, which was showing the movie songs. And whichever ad used to come, on that program, I used to note down, surf at 9 p.m. so and so agency, if I knew the agency, Lintas, and so on and so forth. And so that reflected in a way how passionate I was about advertising. And so I was very clear that that is where I belong, and that's how I joined an agency called Trikaya in the early 90s. And one thing that struck me about life then, and since I was in advertising till 2012, and since I've seen that progress, one thing that struck me was that back then it was truly integrated. So the agency had everything from, of course, the creative folks, media planning and buying folks, print and production, and direct response and so on, all within one roof. And I, as an AE, or anybody as an AE, usually had a much better chance of interacting with specialists in media planning and buying, print production, etc. And one learned the basics as one went along. Okay, and therefore, for example, if I were to place an ad in Times of India Mumbai edition, I would somehow come to know that this is the rate for that particular edition. Now, you may say that, what is the big use of knowing that? But, you are unknowingly gaining some knowledge here and there from various sources. For example, our agencies used to hunt for print production as a billing, as a revenue source of revenue. So if a client were to be, printing thousands of posters for Diwali, let's say, the agency would get the contract, or at least try to get the contract for printing those posters. Okay, so the
Hmm.
AE would have to know the basics of print production. Okay, he would have to know the basics of an artwork, and what is to be given to a publication, to a TV studio. So it somehow made one an all rounder of sorts, as an account management person. And if you look at some of the stalwarts in advertising today, who have grown up in those times, you will see that they are well rounded. They know pretty much the basics of every aspect of advertising, not just account management. So that was one big change that I saw in the 90s as compared to now. Okay, so that was one. Then the second aspect that struck me was, um, there was eye for detail. You had, because you worked with artworks in an era where so if one were to make an artwork, something called bromides had to be got out and pasted properly by the studio artists, etc. It was not as easy as digital now, where you just remove one word, aligned and all that. So everything was hand done, so literally handcrafted. And there was a time when even images were spray painted and corrected. It was not digital. Okay, that came later. Okay, so it was painstakingly crafted, and that craft was something that was evident in copywriting, and every other aspect of the ad process. And I would like to dwell a bit about copywriting, especially because that was something that is very close to my heart. I love print advertising, and that was the height of, or the best years of print advertising in India. I would imagine early 90s. Agencies like Trikaya, Enterprise, Rediffusion, Avenues, others were known for crafting print advertising, which had a few hallmarks. So they would typically be a great headline, clever wordplay, which conveyed a benefit in a charming way, copywriting that made you want to read the copy, okay, and everything tied up with the last line into a whole argument, and typically a reference back to the headline. In that context, can we have the ad of Mauritius, please? Tourism that would bring alive what I'm trying to say. Yeah. So here's an ad. I mean, the this was for Mauritius tourism, and I was among the AEs who carried the artwork for this for printing, and it was one of the most celebrated campaigns from that era. And the tagline, for those who can't read, it says 99% fun, 1% land. Okay, and this particular campaign's head, I mean, one of the ad, the headline says, "Political assassins, ruthless mercenaries, ex-Nazis, Frederick Forsyth found them all in Mauritius." Now it makes you stop and wonder what the hell is going on. What's he talking about? And it goes on to say that Frederick Forsyth, who is a well-known fiction writer, who wrote stories that featured assassins and mercenaries and all that, took a holiday in Mauritius, and he was inspired to write such a book. So it was a lovely way of saying that it's a great getaway to indulge in such activity. So and one had truckloads of such advertising that made one want to be part of the agency. So it built great sense of loyalty towards the agency, and it kind of wanted everybody to produce good work. At the end of the day, that's what we joined advertising for. So that was, something that was, very apparent to me, and I really, really missed that as the advertising industry changed over the years.
This is like a wealth of information, and when I actually saw that ad, that creative literally transported me into Mauritius, and I think I kind of understand a little better what you were mentioning when you say wordcraft,
Yeah.
and I
One other
think I think
thing,
it's
sure.
yes,
One other
please.
thing, Sharon, couple of, to bring alive the typical life of an AE back then, we all used to have something called guard book. Have you heard of the
What
term
is
guard
that?
book? Okay.
I have
A
not heard
guard
of it.
book, a guard is in GUARD, one of the guards. And a guard book was, if I was the AE on, let's say, Sterling Resorts, which is a timeshare resort like Club Mahindra now. Sterling Resorts
Yes.
was one of the pioneers of timeshare. So if I was the AE on that account, so I had to maintain a guard book, which would have all the competitive ads in that sector pasted page after page.
Pasted page after page. You mean
Yeah.
hand pasted and
Yeah.
maintained in a
So
file,
print advertising
hard
was, yeah, print advertising was common back then. So and if went to a store, and if you found a poster or a dangler which was relevant for your category, you would ask from the shopkeeper and take it and then paste it on the guard book. So you literally it was like a competitive review in a physical format. Of course, you can't maintain that now because television is where all the action is. But print being the lead medium, it gave you as an AE sense of ownership for the brand, figuring out what is happening with competition, the urge to keep in touch with what's happening with competition, the trends. So those were the kind of things that one had to do as an AE. Second thing was that, or the third thing was um, senior people involvement, whether it was the
yeah.
client or the agency. The CEO from the client used to be involved in advertising, and I'm not talking about small companies. I used to, or our agency used to work with Gujarat Ambuja Cement, which is by no means a small company. And the CEO of the company at that point in time, Mr. Narottam Saxena, used to be involved in the advertising process, the strategy, along with the CEO of our agency. Okay. Similarly
CEO.
with similarly
Yeah.
with other clients. I remember going for a meeting with to the Thumbs Up factory to meet Mr. Prakash Chauhan. Okay, because he was personally involved in advertising, and so that gave a sense of importance of the advertising to the rank and file. Everybody, how important it is. Okay, And since then, I have seen an era where the CEOs completely unaware of the agency names also, which are part of the portfolio of the company, and it is all left to CMO and the brand manager and so on. So those were the few things that was important. And I'm not saying this just like just for the sake of telling a story, and to relate it back to what could happen, what could we learn from back then. Client servicing was respected, and I'm saying it as an AE. I used to have account directors or client service directors who had the attention of the marketing head of the client. Okay. Now, when I reached a level of account director, I did not have that kind of respect which my bosses had from, their client. And I'm being very frank with you. So those were the kind of things that were good. And I began by saying that it is not all good. We should not get too caught up in this. Oh, those were the days kind of a syndrome. There were a few negatives, if I can say that. Can I share them now?
Yeah, yeah, sure. I was actually going to put you in a tough spot by asking what is the worst thing, rapid fire, about agency life in 90s. But
Yes.
please go ahead.
Yeah. Some of the things are very common. I mean, you get kicked out by creative. You get kicked out by studio production. All that is common. It has not changed. Okay. So even today, one thing that was probably different in a not so good way back then was that there was far too much emphasis on English copywriting, meaning the what shall I say, epitome of
Hmm.
you know great advertising. Okay, most of the
Flowery.
copywriters were, and I'm not saying this in a condescending manner or anything. Most of the advertising agency copywriters were South Bombay, at best Bandra kind of
Okay.
background, very well versed with Western sensibilities, English literature, English movies and music, so on and so forth. And for many of them, anything beyond probably Bandra West would be interiors of India. Okay, and they would not kind of empathize with Indian languages. They will be at loss with the Indian languages. And beyond a certain area of Mumbai, as I said, it would be Bharat, and they would not be able to empathize with that audience. Whereas all your regular consumer products, whether it is tea or soap, etc., were consumed most in the interior. So that kind of connect was probably missing back in the 90s. And I still remember as an AE, the process was, let's say if you are the client and you are a manufacturer of iron, you give a brief to the agency. The copywriter would not meet you. It's the client servicing person who would meet you, take the brief, brief the copywriter. Copywriter would create an ad, give it to the AE. He had to go and sell it to you. And if he can't convince you, then tough luck. You have to come back and get galis from the creative person. And then finally, when you sell it, you have to go and give it to the translation department, and there will be pigeonholes. So there will be pigeonholes with Bengali, Odia, Marathi, etc. So you have to place the photocopy of the English approved,
Wow.
copy in that pigeonhole. So next day, the Marathi writer would come, take it, see what the English copy is, and translate it. No interaction with the original creator of the ad, no background to what the idea was, what was the intent, what was the brief, who's the audience, nothing. Okay.
And the
So a lot
meaning
of,
would change?
I'm sorry,
Sorry. Yeah, I was just curious to hear. Would the meaning completely change? Because obviously
it
this was
would
imagined
sometimes.
by someone from South
Correct.
Bombay with
Sometimes it
this
would. Correct. Sometimes, I
literature.
mean, you would not be able to literally, translate what is, meant in English. So those were difficult days for language advertising. And we had a creative director called Rekha Nigam. She's a very well-known personality now in the film industry also. She kind of spearheaded this change, and she said, no, the advertising has to be created in the original language meant for the audience, which is, so therefore creating advertising in Hindi became cool after her efforts, and a lot of effort were put in to for language writers to get the brief originally, and the intent, and understanding the audience, and then crafting copy in those languages. So those were the some of the negatives. And funnily enough, I mean, if I say this now, nobody would believe me. um, if an agency were to be briefed on a print ad, the creative guys would say that, okay, we'll revert with the first version after a week or so.
Okay.
Okay. So, I mean,
Wow.
unheard of nowadays. People will require stuff in the next half an hour. Okay. So, I mean, those were, I guess, the business environment was also different back then. It was not so competitive that you had to create those, moment marketing ideas, and, topical ads now, and topical social media posts and all that. So there was luxury of time, that was there. So those were some of the things that, I remember from back in the 90s.
No, that's like a wealth of information and some fantastic insights. As is our audience saying, I see some very interesting comments from Jayshri and Abdul, and I heard two very interesting things in what you said. One was the integrated agency part, so I'm going to come to that a bit later. And the second thing I really was interested to know about was print. You said that there was this appreciation for print. A lot of the advertising was print. So, what is this thing about print that is still very attractive, used to be attractive? I would just love to know more about it.
Sure. Before I answer that, Jayashree commented or asked, but didn't it require people to know who Frederick Fawcett was? Of course, yeah. See, Mauritius tourism was targeting to, within quotes, an elite audience. Okay, and uh, you know, uh, and those probably had a lot of sensibilities from the West, and they would, I mean, one assumed that they would know who Fawcett was. And another campaign in the same ad, talked about Bridget Bardot, who's a well-known actress. Okay, so those are unlikely to be names understood in smaller towns, but it worked. It was a very, very popular campaign, and it really worked for the client. Now, coming to print, what are
Yes.
the charm? Okay, so later in 2000s, perhaps, I came across this term of lean forward advertising and lean backward advertising. Okay, it is said that lean backward advertising is when you're consuming television. You're relaxed, you're literally leaning backward and watching, aram
Hmm.
say, and so whereas your lean forward is when you're reading a magazine or reading a newspaper. You're kind of engrossed in it. It's like reading a book. Okay, and in that context, the way you interact with the content is very different. So, for
Hmm.
example, in print advertising, as you're scanning through the newspaper's headlines, if there's an ad that catches your attention purely by wordplay in the headline or an interesting visual, it can draw you into reading more.
Hmm.
And
Yes. Yes.
and if it is written well, you kind of read it like a conversation that you're having with the brand. And sometimes, if it is written well, written with humor, written with charm, it brings a smile. Okay, so you're kind of, what shall I say, uh, unknowing to you, subliminally, you are liking the ad, and you're transferring that likability to the brand. These are not something that you feel, okay, now this is the moment I've transferred the likability
Hmm.
of the
Hmm.
ad to the brand. It all happens, unknowingly to you. Okay, it brings a smile. Like for example, I mean, I can quote from a recent campaign, Dunzo, which is a very popular brand in Bangalore, at least, because I mean the headquarters is in Bangalore. They released a campaign recently, which is a full page ad. When they started their grocery deliveries, etc., they released a full page ad where they gave what are the common Kannada phrases that you should use, when you're dealing with, say, the sabzi wala or the auto guy, and so on and so
Oh.
forth. Now,
Interesting.
Bangalore being a cosmopolitan city, a lot of people coming in from outside the state to work in IT industry, etc. They found
Mm-hmm.
it useful, but it was not a blandly written ad. It was something written with humor, okay, and some charm, some style, some swag. So in a way, it makes you feel nice about the brand because it charmed you, and we can always relate to this, right? When you're, let's say, when you're visiting a store, if the store person charms you, by talking, nicely to you or understanding your needs, and you're inclined to listen to what he or she is trying to sell you. Similar response. So print advertising has that that charm of well written copy, like how you like a well written book, the wordplay that brings a smile, and the combination of image and the words working together. So those are the charms. Those are the things that I like, personally like about print advertising. Of course, every medium has its own merits and demerits. So print is like that. Have I answered your question?
This is amazing. Yeah, it does, and it answers it really well. Very clear, and I think for those who have been in digital, right, or those who have, I can say, bought on a steady dose of digital marketing, for them, uh, print seems to be an alien medium, right? So this view into print is really really helpful, and I think all the people who are tuning in would get a lot of insights from your view on print. But I'm going to now come to the second part. I think you have something more on print. The charm
Yes.
is back.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah. Correct.
please.
If you see the chatter on LinkedIn or Twitter, etc., about
Hmm.
many veterans in advertising and marketing speaking about how the art of print is dead. Okay, that is
Oh
true.
yes.
Okay, because a lot of the copywriters who are, let's say, veterans already with 5 years experience would not have had the chance to be trained on copywriting for print, because they are brought on board to write social media posts or a TV script or a YouTube film, etc. They may be good at that. They may be good at scripting a web film and so on. Whereas writing for print calls for a different kind of flair, different kind of talent, etc. And unfortunately, clients don't emphasize, or the client don't seem to ask for it. If you ask me, if clients were to dandamaro and say our print advertising sucks and you guys better do something about it, agencies would do it. Whereas even big advertisers, in cars or any other category, they feel that just by putting the picture of the car, a bullet point, kind of a copy, now launched or now available at 7.87 lakhs as a headline, they see it is good enough, because they see engagement, or the need for engagement in digital media. So agencies, continue with that practice.
This is a very different and interesting perspective, and I'm going to talk a bit more about how copywriting in digital is different from copywriting in print a little bit, later. But I'm going to come back to that part where you spoke about something called an integrated agency. You said that in those days agencies were integrated. So if like I was an AE, I still knew what was the print ad kind of rate, or I would know what are the other aspects being worked upon in that particular campaign or brand. So little bit more about when did this pivot happen, like when do you think the agency structure changed, if it has, and how's that impacted the whole marketing and advertising ecosystem?
Right. The industry changed its shape and color when media planning and buying was hived off as a specialist unit.
Okay.
There was a lot of pressure from clients to re-look at agency commission as the means of compensation, and they wanted to move to monthly retainer as the
Hmm, hmm, hmm.
form of compensation. And a lot of purchasing folks from the client side got involved, said, why are we paying you guys so much retainer, so much commission? Let's move to a retainer based on your deliverables, etc., etc., and number of people involved, resources, and all that. And so retainer fee became the norm, and agencies separated the media planning function. So therefore, they became two, you know, power centers, if it were, you know, one creative and one media,
Yes, yes.
not talking to each other. Because,
Hmm.
you know,
Hmm.
creative, earlier there used to be a lot of interaction between creative and media, saying that, okay, this is our audience, this is what we could try in media, etc., etc. And that kind of got diluted with this shift. And then the retainer fee as a practice for compensation came into being. That put a lot of pressure on the bottom line of agencies also, because, you know, and there was competition. So if, you know, agency X agreed on amount Y as a retainer fee, another agency would say, I will agree to a fee of, you know, amount Y minus 10, you know, uh, as an example. Okay.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
you know, that put a lot of pressure in not being able to hire senior resources. So you had, you know, uh, not very experienced people getting involved in brand strategy and, you know, communication. I'm not saying that, you know, all those who are inexperienced do not grasp strategy or do not grasp communication strategy. That's not what I'm trying to say. Uh, there is a certain level of experience and maturity required to understand the entire aspect of business and the role of marketing and role of communication, and that comes with time. Okay, so I think that impacted, and I could sense it in, you know, as late as 2010 or 2012 in advertising. You know, I remember an account director with, say, let's say 10 years experience or 10 to 15 years experience, his or her day to day interactions, you know, regarding the brand that they're working on, would largely be about the next film, right?
Okay.
And,
Yes. Yes.
television
I've heard.
was the television spot was very important. TV spots, TV campaigns were very important. So the account management team is interacting with the film production team or the film, you know, or the film production house externally, and coordinating the TV shoot and, you know, presenting scripts and all that, and getting involved in that. Okay, and maybe packaging or POS material, etc. But the from the brand side, the brand manager is dealing with a media agency. He's
Hmm.
dealing
Hmm.
with a digital agency who's managing social media and Facebook and, you know, Instagram and all that. He's probably dealing with another agency which is managing events and something else. So
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
person has a lot better perspective, 360-degree perspective of the business of the brand than the agency, which was the case you know, in 1990, when the agency had the full control or the full perspective of the brand. So that, I think, that is the biggest impact that has happened since the hiving of the media agency bit.
Interesting. I think this is again very, very insightful. I mean, honestly, having been at the center of advertising and marketing myself for the last decade or so, I've seen this play out, but I could never connect the dots like this, the way you have just explained. Which brings me to another follow up question to this.
Sure.
Do you think that this shift that you just spoke about, right,
Yeah.
retainers coming in the picture, did
Yeah.
this cause more shifts of agency for a brand, or did this mean that the brand said, okay, this is the retainer, now you can stay here for next 20 years? I mean, what was like the dynamics for this change? Did
I
brands shift
think,
agencies more or less?
yeah, I think, you know, it resulted in a lot of short-term relationships.
Hmm.
You know, earlier, as I said, because senior folks were involved, they invested in relationships for a long period of time. Okay, it was common for agencies to work on a particular brand for decades. Okay, because, you know, whether it is network related, global network related, or
Hmm.
personal relationships related, the relationships continued. And what changed from the client side over the last, say, probably 10 years or so, and, you know, there are some stats also floating around in the web about the average tenure of the CMO has come down,
Yes.
right? So a CMO stays a CMO for 2 years. I don't know what the average is, or a short period of time, you know, and so would be the brand team's tenure. So what happens is that when somebody new comes on in a brand role, their first thing to that they would like to do is change everything. Okay, and that happens with agencies also. For example, if there is a team running with on a brand for years and years, typical reaction from even from the agency side would be, "Arey yaar, why are we doing the same old thing again and again? Can we do something new? If it is working, why should we change it? Or why should we, if it's not broken, don't fix it," is something that has not come naturally to us. So, and when the new brand team comes, they look for a new agency, they look for a new tagline, they look for a new theme. So everything becomes short term and tactical, and not something that you think of as thematic advertising that you invest for a long period of time, which was the case earlier.
This is actually again very exciting to know, because we all know brand building is a long term affair. I mean, it cannot be a short term fling, right? And the more and more it becomes a fling, the harder it is for the consumer to retain that image of the brand in their minds. So this is interesting. And I know we are getting a lot of questions, but we are going to be taking some questions towards the end. This is also a call, in case our listeners want to send in any questions. Please feel free to do that in the comments, and between me and Mr. Bhatt, we'll try to answer them towards the end of the show.
Yeah.
But I'm going to, move to, we can say, like, the next pivot or the next section now, which is going to talk about uh, this era, right? This era where there is digital, and honestly, this is an interesting time, because
Yeah.
we are seeing that this year itself, a lot of predictions are being made that digital will overtake television advertising, right? So, how do you see the rise of digital advertising, and how's that affected
Okay.
marketing and advertising? So,
Okay. It's my
love to hear
favorite
your
topic.
views.
Okay.
Favorite?
Okay.
Great.
Okay. And my favorite quote, my all-time favorite quote. As I read this a few years ago and it stayed in my mind. This is a quote from the 1950s. Okay, and it says, "People don't read ads." By the way, I was not born in the 1950s. Okay, okay, the quote says,
Yes.
"People don't read ads. People read what interests them. Sometimes it's an ad." And it's by a mad men era advertising guru called 𝗦𝗛𝗘𝗧𝗏. Okay, and if you were to
Hmm.
extrapolate that to today, you can say people don't read ads; they read, watch, listen to what interests them. Okay,
Yes.
whether it is a blog post that a company has written, or a social media post that a brand has posted, or an Instagram reel from a brand, or a tweet from a brand, if it's interesting, they will see it. Your audience will see it. They are not there on Twitter or Instagram for your brand communication. Okay, so that is for me a timeless code to abide by. And another important aspect that we should never forget is that fundamentals of marketing and communication will not, have not, and will not change. Primarily because our human instincts have remained the same for eons.
Hmm. True. Yes.
David, Bill Bernbach once said, and I'm going to read that quote: "It is fashionable to talk about changing man. A communicator must be concerned with unchanging man, with his obsessive drive to survive, to be admired, to succeed, to love, to take care of his own." Now, in which era is this not true? We
Hmm.
all want to be admired, to survive, to succeed, to love, to take care of our own. Those instincts will remain the same. Okay, so if a brand appeals to these senses in some manner, okay, uh, they will survive whether it is a analog world or a digital world. That is my fundamental point. Okay, so if I were to put it down in simple English, it's about um, finding a way to say relevant things in a compelling way at the right time on the right platform. For example, if we all get notifications from brands, right, from your bank, etc. Sometimes when I wondered when I switch my phone on and I see a notification from my bank, at 5:30 in the morning about some offer or something which is totally irrelevant to me at that point in time in my mindset. Okay, so that's an example of a communication that has gone wrong from a context point of view. Okay, so I think first thing to know to understand is that fundamentals will remain the same, whether it is the world of Twitter or moment marketing or radio ads or television ads. So that is number one. Second aspect that I find which is relevant to digital advertising and the whole ecosystem is that there is far too much emphasis on shiny new toy. Okay, so
Yes.
there
Yes.
somebody will say, "Boss, metaverse is the big thing, so you have to jump on it." Okay, or somebody else would say, "Moment marketing is the big thing, so you have to jump on it." Okay, so on and so forth. Okay, so there's this obsession with shiny new toy, which sometimes blinds us to jump on that bandwagon without really understanding whether the brand needs it or not. Okay, brand purpose is another thing that everybody talks about. So and brands seem to think that if I miss that, you know um, I have lost out as a brand. Will my competition score big? So there is FOMO, fear of missing out, and we see that happening with moment marketing or topical ads. My favorite example. Let's say if Tiger Woods comes back to play golf, brands are trying to see whether they can make a connect with that event and their brand. A man lands on Mars, and somebody wants to Virat and somebody gets Anushka get married, or Ranbir and Alia get married. A brand tries to you know find a connect. Sometimes it works, but it is not going to be true for all brands. So digital advertising and digital when I mean digital is largely in the context of social media advertising as I see it. There is a lot of fear of missing out that drives participation in platforms, participation in trends and fads like hashtags, which may not be totally relevant to a brand from a business perspective. That's my personal view.
Very, very interesting insights. And I completely resonate with this, especially for digital marketers. And a lot of chats that I have start with, I want to go into digital marketing, where I tell them that essentially it is marketing at the end of the day, and you are talking to the same consumer. So why don't you start with marketing first? But again,
Absolutely.
let me bring you back to that point we discussed, right, about copywriting. The most interesting part about copywriting being that you could bring it to life in different ways on print. How's
Yes.
copywriting changed when you take it to another medium like a mobile screen?
Yeah. Uh, can I have the ad which is to do with Virgin Voyages on screen? Yeah. So here
Yeah.
is a banner that is on Virgin Voyages, which is a cruise brand from the Virgin Group, and this is their a copy over there. And if you see, Nourish the Soul is the headline, and they talk about food being served in those cruises, and food being lavish stuff or sumptuous stuff, etc. But if you see the call to action line, it says, "Now I'm hungry." Okay. Now that's a charming way of saying, it's a charming call to action, right? Typically, call to action is something that we all think that it has to be on the lines of buy now, shop now, no more, stuff like that. That's boring, right? And here is something that they've done so nicely, which reflects the tone of voice of the brand, and they carried it forward across all the platforms. So writing is writing. You have to figure out what is it that your what are the strengths of the medium, and figure out the best way of conveying that. In that context, I remember listening to a radio spot from UK where um, the radio spot basically had two voices speaking at the same time. So one could not figure out what the hell was going on. One could not understand either of those messages. Then suddenly both the voices stopped and said, "It is hard to concentrate on one thing, on two things at the same time. Don't talk on a mobile phone and drive."
Wow, what a way to
Yeah,
deliver a message.
yeah, so it was using the medium's advantage of audio so well to convey a message. So whether it is copywriting for mobile screen, or for radio, or a hoarding, your fundamentals are that it must be it must be relevant to that context. Okay, and I go back to that Howard Research comment. People don't read ads; they read what interests them. So, in a mobile phone screen, one has to figure out the limitations of the real estate that is available, the character count, the word count, etc., and have to make it interesting. So, those were the broad guidelines, I would say, when it comes to copywriting for the digital media.
Great, great. These are very very good golden rules to live by. I think because like I also said earlier, and we were discussing a while back, the consumer has not changed. The consumer fundamentals remain the same, and therefore I think customer experience across different touch points is also an important aspect, right? And there's a lot of debate on it. There's a lot of talk about what is the kind of customer experience we want to deliver. Should it be consistent? How does the brand interact with the consumer?
Right.
So what are your thoughts on modern marketing? What are those 3 4 things that you think define modern marketing, and how do marketeers weave in customer experience there? So that's what I would love to know.
Okay. Whether it is modern marketing or, within quotes, traditional marketing, I think two things are to be kept in the back of our mind. How well do we know our customer? Uh, do we have a powerful insight that resonates with that customer? And thirdly, how can we be of some value to the customer? I think those three would, be the fundamentals of any marketing at any era. So if I were to dwell on the first point, which is, um, you know, in the context of knowing the customer and having an insight, if I were to say this insight, um, let's say, in between meal hunger makes us irritable and act out of character. Is that a statement that you would agree with?
Not really. Sometimes, maybe. Not
Sometimes.
sure.
So when you're hungry in between meals, most of us are irritable, like, because you're impatient, etc. You act
Yes.
out of character. Okay, that became the insight for Snickers. You're not you when you're hungry was what the line was. Okay, Nike said, it's not just the championship athlete or record breakers that strive to push their limits. So just do it is a encapsulation of that thought, right? So and they bring it alive in different mediums, different formats, and be of some value. So in that context, can I have the outdoor of Nike?
Sure.
Isn't that wow?
That's
So,
like I for a second I couldn't imagine what's happening, and then
yeah,
I mean
so
the
eye
3D
popping,
effect
right? Yeah, so
was
let's say you're in Japan and you're watching this live. It's a showstopper. Okay, and it is 3D. It brought its experience, so it brought alive the drool factor of Nike as a brand. You can't take your eyes off it. Okay, and it used the outdoor medium so well beyond just a vinyl poster. So in a way, it brings it kind of ties to the customer experience thing that we spoke about. Customer experience, I know, is a what shall I say, umbrella phrase that is used for lots of things. It could be customer experience when somebody visits a website. It could be a customer experience when somebody visits a, outlet. You know, for example, if I am a telecom operator customer, how am I treated when I visit a store? You know, to change my number or have an issue with a bill or stuff like that. Okay, or it could be on the app. If I'm trying to use the app, does it behave well? Does it crash? You know, so on and so forth. Okay, so customer experience and or on the website, you know, what is the kind of copy that is used over there? How does it make me? Does it bring alive the brand's tone of voice? So
Hmm.
those are the kind of things, especially in B2B, you know, where you are dealing with enterprises. Okay, is your website conveying the right kind of imagery for your brand?
Hmm.
And does it convey? Does it give all the information that is required for a committee of decision makers at the buyer's level to shortlist you and, you know, get you into the consideration set? So all that becomes part of the customer experience in the digital world. So there's a lot has changed. So it is no longer, you know, create a print ad or create a television ad and then release it, and then you can sit back and relax for the next 6 months. It takes a lot nowadays, you know, because you have to be present in so many different platforms in so many different ways, and you know, you have to respond in double quick time, etc., etc. So those are the challenges that are there in the digital world when it comes to customer experience.
Agreed, it's not easy being a marketer in today's time. And I
Absolutely not.
think the moment marketing part where you spoke about the fact that today, like if you tell someone that moment aa gaya hai and I'll come back to you tomorrow, nobody's ready to hear that. It's like
Correct.
abhi bhej do,
Correct. In that
right?
context, can I share? Can I have that example of oxygen, the topical ad?
Sure, sure.
Yeah, so this is an ad from a brand called Oxygen. I mean, I don't know what they do. It said it was released on August 15th as a print ad, I think. It said the oxygen of India's financial freedom. So it is in the area of finance. And okay, I'm not trying to belittle the brand's efforts. Please don't mistake me in that aspect. I'm just trying to bring alive the point that, you know, because the context is freedom, Independence Day, they're trying to kind of force fit the brand's what shall I say, benefit of financial freedom to the context. So as a user, I know it is a hardcore sale ad. I mean, you're trying to sell the brand, but you're trying to do it in the context of wishing people on, in Independence Day. So in a way, it kind of falls between two stools. You're neither here nor there. So these are the kind of pitfalls that, happen when you put yourself in a place where moment marketing or topical advertising is required. I must do it. Mother's Day, I must do an ad. Father's Day, I must do an ad. So that is the kind of pressure that, brands can avoid and see what is relevant for them.
I think that's an interesting theme to carry forward for brands. Like what is relevant for them is what they should focus on, right? And what is relevant for their consumers, most importantly.
Right. Earlier, you asked about brand purpose, I think.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
yeah. So in that context, my view is that for years, I mean, while brand purpose as a term has come to vogue in the last few, years, um, the concept of higher order benefit has always, been there in advertising. Okay. So what I mean by higher order benefit is that, you know, um, you're not just selling a perfume, you're selling confidence. I'm
Hmm,
just
hmm.
argument. Okay, that's a confidence is the higher order benefit. Okay, sometimes it is stretched so far that it becomes incredulous. You can't believe. Like, for example, there's a famous cartoon from a cartoonist called Tom Fishburne, where there is
Yes.
it was in 2013, the cartoon where it talks about a brand of chips, crisps, where they are doing the laddering, okay, benefit laddering, and at the very top is world peace. So the the brand is actually offering world peace as a benefit, as a joke, of course. So it was trying to say that you're stretching it so far that it becomes incredible. Advertising, one says that people there is a concept called suspension of disbelief in watching advertising.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
What I mean by that is, if an ad shows somebody doing well in an interview and getting a job because they're wearing a great perfume, you're not going to actually believe that they got the job because the perfume was great, right? You're
Was
going to
good.
see it as, okay, just another ad. Okay, you're suspending disbelief. Okay, so in that context, brand purpose has become, another way of higher order benefit stretched so far that it becomes unrelatable. For example, I remember a soft drink brand, a carbonated fizzy drink brand, talking about exam pressure and saying that parents must prepare kids for exam pressure, and don't put too much pressure on kids for during the exam and so on and so forth. And it was brought by the fizzy drink brand. Now, and the tenuous link was release the pressure. When you open a carbonated drink, from that cap, it releases pressure, right? So that perhaps was linked to exam pressure, and it was all getting very tenuous and unbelievable. Whereas, when your brand purpose is, believable when the brand actually acts and not just ads, doesn't add. Okay. So for example, you know, if you as a company, cater to all kinds of people with, say, specially abled people, or have shirt sizes for all shapes and not just slim fit, you're actually, proving that you care for people and you actually act upon it, not just claim it. Okay. So in that context, some brands do it right. I mean, can I have the example of that brand purpose from Ariel? You're all familiar with this whole ease the load campaign from Ariel,
Yes.
where they talk about how, share the load. I'm sorry, where they say that it is the husband's responsibility too to share the load, and they brought that alive with in the classifieds ad for matrimonials. Where they said 41% women, 41% men still believe laundry is a woman's job, and then they told that you can add this whole context or the hashtag of share the load to your profile to convey that you have that attitude of equality, so that you are whatever considered in the
Hmm.
positive light by the
Right.
opposite sex. So this is an example of the consistency of communication and brand purpose fitting in with the category, because it is Ariel, it is washing. So share the load all made sense. So this is an example of brand purpose done well, I would imagine.
Agreed. I mean, that was some way of making a point. And on that note, as we are drawing to a close, I'm going to ask you my last question for the day, but not the last question for the day. What are your takeaways for some of the young marketeers? And I'm saying marketeers, including all types of marketing. What would your sense of wisdom for them be?
Okay, I'm no one to pass on wisdom, but I would say that first thing, there are several things, and off the top of my head, firstly, knowing that it is hard work and there's a lots of boring stuff, and knowing your customer is the most important requisite. It is not glamour. It is not strategy that you put your feet up and sit in your corner office and think of a grand strategy that will work in every corner of India. It's not going to work. One anecdote that I remember from my advertising days back then is that, I mean, it's a apocryphal. So I mean, this is heard. I don't know whether it's true. Apparently, in Godrej, somebody discovered that men's hair dye sales were shooting up in rural Maharashtra. So
Okay.
everybody was wondering, how are people in rural Maharashtra so looks conscious that they are dyeing their hair and buying it in truckloads, and why are the sales shooting up?
Yeah.
So the marketing person, the senior person, actually went into the market and discovered that people are buying the Godrej hair dye by the truckloads, literally, to blacken their buffaloes, so that the buffaloes get
Wow.
a good price, where they are sold. So that's how consumers use, your product. Whereas you're thinking of how am I going to create that wonderful ad which will give to talk about, looking young, and so those are realities of life. So whether you could be in selling pharma, boring categories like roofing sheets, cement. So it is not always about fashion and high involvement products. So you'll have to understand that it is hard work. It is about visiting markets, observing consumer behavior, knowing them, what makes them tick, what are their pain points. So that helps. So I would imagine, that empathy, whether you're working on a car category or fashion category or, inexpensive footwear category, that is what is going to be the first prerequisite for anybody looking at marketing and advertising, as a career. Number one. Second
I
one, off the top of my head, is to figure out um, how best can you use the brand message in that relevant in that medium. you know
Hmm.
you have to, just because you're a brand, it does not mean that you have to have a Facebook page or a Instagram page. It is not mandatory. One thing that today that we have realized is that what used to be called user generated content is a reality today. We all use Instagram, and you see such creative reels coming from regular folks. Okay. So, and when you scroll down, whether it is great photography or great ideas for reels and so on, a brand has to beat that. It can't be a boring communication in that milieu, right? So that has to be understood, that you have to be relevant in the context that you're operating, whether it is on social media or on mass media. Then lastly, the one about human insights, whether it is a shoe or buying a tech services. It's about understanding humans and what are the insights that drive that purchase. So those are the key things that one would should keep in the back of mind. And my ultimate watch out is the understanding that um, creativity is going to be the ultimate edge, because we live in a product parity world. What I as a brand, can deliver, my competitor can deliver in 2 days. The actual real product edge is not going to be around for a long period of time. If a car says I do this, a competitor brand can deliver that equally well. So creativity is going to be the edge, that a brand has. In fact, going back to Bernbach and quotes, he said, "Creativity is the last unfair advantage we are legally allowed to take over our competitors." So that would be my parting, viewpoint.
That was going to be my line. I was going to say that, that is a fantastic thought to end today's conversation on. And it has been an absolute delight, Mr. Bhatt. Before we bid goodbye to each other and to our audiences, I'm going to quickly take one question, because we have time for that. And I think that question is quite wholesome, from Jayashri, which says, how do you measure the success of your campaign now?
Right. Um, okay, that's too broad, because for each business category, business scenario, the success metrics would be very different. If I am a startup, unknown brand, for a short period of time, merely creating brand awareness could be a metric. That is what seems to be riding the decisions of several brands who are in the startup space to launch on IPL, right?
Hmm.
Nobody would have, probably a lot of the brands would owe their awareness to being present on IPL, either through ads or through association, like, branding of a sixer or branding of something or the other on the IPL, broadcast, etc. So, depending on the context, brand awareness could be a metric. Again, depending on the context, if it's an app, the number of downloads, the spends that occur through the platform could be a metric. So there is no one size fits all kind of an answer for your traditional fast moving consumer goods like your soap or toothpaste. It's very clearly the offtake from the shelves. If it's a planned purchase like a toothpaste or a biscuit, um, what is it that what kind of share of basket is your brand having from the monthly purchase, right? So
Right.
those are the metrics that come to mind. There is no one size fits all kind of an approach.
Interesting. And on that note, I think let's draw it to a close. It has been a totally delightful conversation, Mr. Bhatt, and I have thoroughly enjoyed the evening. I hope our listeners did too. And with that, parting words, Mr. Bhatt.
I wish we had more time because I had tons of notes, made to speak about several other topics. But probably for another day. I hope the audience found some value. As I said in my talk, that be of some value should be a guideline for a brand. I hope we have been of some value to the audience, and look forward to connecting with you all again soon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bhatt, for those parting words and for being here and for sharing those wonderful insights. It has been an absolutely great 1 hour plus for me. Lots of learning. And thank you to again to our listeners. Again, this was the 101 edition of the TLR shows. Please keep tuning in. And all right, bye bye. Have a good evening ahead.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Take care.
Thank
Bye.
you.